Morning, glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt on July 4th. It is an annual tradition on the Hugh Hewitt Show for at least a decade for me to talk with author Daniel Silva about his new book, which is not yet out but will be soon. In this case, it is The Collector. And The Collector will be available for pre-order at Amazon and bookstores everywhere and at Barnes & Noble. Good morning, Danny. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning. So good to hear your voice.
I always tell you I love your books, but I really love this book. The Collector, I have not read the last 20 pages because I did not want to run the risk of doing a spoiler on the show. This is fabulously plotted. Is this the 23rd Alon novel?
It is, which is, I still can't believe that he has persevered all these years. You know, he was only supposed to be in a single book, unlike a lot of authors who have continuing characters. You know, who they created the character for the express purpose of having him be a long-running protagonist. That's not what I did with Gabriel. He was supposed to appear in one book and one book only, and I was talked into writing a second book by a very smart figure in the publishing industry. That book did better than the first Gabriel Alon book. I was talked into writing another book by my editor at the time, the third book, which sort of one of the most important books of the series, a book called The Confessor. It's difficult to believe, but when I first thought of The Confessor, it was not supposed to be a Gabriel Alon book. And now here we are, 20 books after that, 23 books in the Gabriel Alon series.
And your art gets better. I suppose it's like an artist. You get better with age and with practice. Let me start by telling people about compromat. Something I learned about in 1984 when I joined the Department of Justice and had my first defensive briefing because I was going to have classified. I learned about compromat. I still can't believe people fall for it, Daniel Silva. And it's central to this book because this book is about Russia in part. How much do you think it still goes on?
I think that as I write in the book, that the book imagines that there is some internal resistance to Vladimir Putin, and now we know, thanks to the events of late July, that there is internal resistance to Vladimir Putin. And this character remarks to another character in the novel that it is the crowning achievement of Putin is not named as the president, but of the Putin era, that Russia is a compromat state, that everyone who participates in the Russian president's inner circle, who rises to power, who makes money, who has any position of influence, is compromised in some way by their very participation in the state. It is a compromat state. But in terms of how the Russians compromise people into doing their bidding, as you know, as another character says in the book, why would anyone work for the Russians, really? Yes, some people believe in Putinism, but mainly they have two ways to recruit assets, and that is with money and to compromise them. And people get compromised for all kinds of different reasons. But money is a very powerful weapon that the Russians have wielded against the West. It's a topic that I've explored in previous books, and you know, people do really foolish things for money.
This is a great book.
Right? And sex.
It is a great book for anyone who is going to deal with any foreign actor, but especially the Chinese and the Russians, to read just as a prophylactic kind of a prudential read, because it's riveting and it's believable, and boy, does it work. I want to ask at the very beginning, I've got lots of notes. I got 4 pages of notes on this, so I'm not going to give anything away, but I'm going to ask you a lot of specifics. First of all, Von Damme. That's a name. Yes. I'm not going to tell you anything about that. There's a Von Damme in Ted Lasso. I'm just wondering, was that a connection, or does that come out of the brain of Danny Silva?
Von Damme is a very, very common name. I'm not a Ted Lasso person, so no, there's no allusion to Ted Lasso in the.
Okay, I just wondering because Von Damme matters a lot in Ted Lasso. Next, Dr. Zhivago. shows up a lot. And the quote is,
Yes.
and remember, you must never, under any circumstances, despair. To hope and to act, these are our duties and misfortune. Boris Pasternak. That comes up 3 times in the book. Has that hung around in Daniel Silva's brain for a long time?
Yeah, it's one of the most memorable lines from Chicago. Um, and if you are looking, watching your country invade a neighbor, people who speak a language that's related to you, that they're sort of your cousins, that you're engaging in um, brutal massacres of civilians, that you're bombing children intentionally, that you're using rape as a weapon of war. Um, and it's all carried out at the behest of this guy who is a kleptomaniac who is probably the richest man in the world. Um, I hope that this line is running through the heads of some Russians right now as they're sitting there watching Vladimir Putin turn their Russia into a totalitarian state once again. I mean, the level of political repression has reached Stalinist levels again, and I hope that people are reading Boris Pasternak right now in Russia and thinking about that line, and
Now,
just
Daniel,
finding the courage to resist this nonsense.
I want to ask about one particular thing, which is I can't remember every detail of all 23 books, though I've read them all. I don't think we've been in detail to Copenhagen before. I don't believe we've been to Denmark before. We certainly haven't been up on the peninsula. Am I right about that? Is this all new? Because it seemed to me like, although many of the characters are familiar, beginning the first one that will be familiar is Dimbley, but Landsman's here, Durand is here. They're all here, and they're like old friends of mine. But I don't think you've used Copenhagen in Denmark before, have you?
I never correct the host, but yeah, Denmark and Jutland Peninsula and the Skagen area have appeared in the novel before,
Okay.
and in the series before, I should say. In uh, Secret Servant, there was a Denmark sequence, and then there was a little reappearance in a book called The Fallen Angel. And it's one of my favorite places on earth, up there in Skagen. It's obviously that's where the Skagen school of Scandinavian painters formed and gathered every summer in the late 19th century. It's just an extraordinary place. I love it up there. And I also am just a big fan of Denmark, and I wanted to do a book set largely in Denmark. If there's an illusion, it's not Ted Lasso, it's Borgen. We're Borgen fanatics in this house,
Well, I also want to say Finland is going to be both happy and unhappy with your book, but I'll leave that to another time. New to me, the Camorra, the Black Cobras. I looked up the Black Cobras. They actually exist. I've never heard of I can't even say it. Andragant. How do you say that organized crime thing?
Well, that first word would be silent, Dragetta. So people use the word mafia to describe Italian organized crime, but it's really broken down into regional groups. So in the Naples area, that's Camorra, and then in Calabria, that's Dragetta, and this is really the most, I would say, the most powerful organized crime family or organization in the world. This is a gigantic um, apparatus that it is all through Italian society, all through Europe. They own property and launder money all across Europe. They're bad people, dangerous people.
I looked up Black Cobras. They were real, but they've kind of exited from Sweden. And this is a big question. Do I underestimate how many truly evil people there are running around the world? Because I'm always amazed by how many truly evil people there are in the collector.
Look, I think I would. What is the book called? This British journalist called Tom Burgess. I don't know if it popped up on your radar, if you interviewed him a couple of years ago. Wrote a book called Kleptomania, And it was basically his thesis. I'm shorthanding it and doing violence to it, I suppose. But basically, that
Hold
the
for a
world
second. We got to go to a
turned
break,
into
Danny. You
one
can't hear the
gigantic
music.
cesspool of corruption.
You you can't hear the music, but I do. So I will come back and we'll pick up the bad guys in the world with Daniel Silva. The new book, The Collector. You can pre-order it. It'll be #1 in the New York Times. So get your copies before they sell out. Make it inconvenient for a couple of weeks. The Collector at Amazon and bookstores everywhere. I'll be right back with Daniel Silva. Welcome back, America. Daniel Silva is my guest. He cannot hear Brahms D minor playing, or maybe you can hear Brahms D minor. I always take my music from Daniel Silva's references in the book, and it's there. Daniel, before we went to break, you were talking about the cesspool. How big is it? Because organized crime in The Collector is everywhere.
Well, but it goes beyond just what we think of as the criminal class. Um, if you were to you know stare too long at the Panama Papers scandal, you would think that everyone in a position of power and wealth is engaged in criminal activity and tax evasion of some sort. We have a shrinking number of democracies around the world. We have a rise in uh, the the kleptocratic model like Vladimir Putin. Extraordinary amounts of dirty money sloshing through the global financial system. Um, and what's interesting about the art world where Gabriel operates is that it all really does collide in the art world. The art world is, of course, the business of art has always been filled with a lot of intrigue. And then I really think that is the case these days in spades, as they say.
You had no way of knowing that in the June 19th issue of the New Yorker, there's a story by Catherine Schultz how a Frenchman stole $2 billion worth of art. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, not only is that prescient by Daniel Silva, but so is the reference to November 1917. That's spooky, Daniel Silva. No one brought up November 17th or November 1917 when you were writing this book. You had to have already gone to press when the march on Moscow by the mercenaries began.
Yeah, but if you look at Russian history, as Gabriel does in the novel, and you go back to 100 plus years, and you start with the Russo-Japanese War, which was a debacle. Well, what happened? Well, we had the Russian Revolution of 1905 happened after that. Every time that Russia has had a battlefield disaster or an overseas disaster, um, there has been, in effect, a government has fallen. It had after World War One, after Afghanistan. I mean, they were out, and then the Soviet Union was over. And so, you trust me, Vladimir Putin knows his Russian history. He sees himself as a historical figure. He knows what is happening, and how important it is that this thing that he has launched in Ukraine, that he not lose. And I think makes him very, very dangerous. We got through this. He got through this first one, but this is only the beginning, I'm afraid. Um, Actually, I hope.
You have a
And
character
and
say,
and he's knows that he's not going to survive if this war in Ukraine does not end well.
I have two direct quotes from the book. The first one is, old age tended to fall on Russian men like a brick from a window. And the second is, he won't lose the war in Ukraine because he can't lose the war in Ukraine. I thought that was actually prophetic as well.
Um, well, the first quote refers to the don't know what the lifespan of the average Russian male is right now. I think it's about 59 years of age. They don't live very long. They drink too much and smoke too much. Um, and that's that is the point I was just making, that he cannot lose this war. He knows he cannot, and that is why. While I think that the threat of him using nuclear weapons has receded a bit, I think the chances are greater than zero that he will resort to some sort of nuclear or nuclear-ish incident to try to prevail in Ukraine.
I do worry about that myself. I want to tell people I fell for a MacGuffin. If you read Daniel Silva, don't blame yourself if you fall for a MacGuffin. It's on page 91, the brass spike. I'm just going to leave it there. I thought the brass spike would be the Krav Maga, but I was wrong. Did you put that in there for that reason?
I'll discuss it. And in the first draft, the brass spike was utilized in this scene. I won't elaborate. But on review, upon further review, as we say in the NFL, we thought that it was just a little too violent for Gabriel, and I airbrushed that out.
Oh, I just thought you were just purposely. You had all of us who are regulars say, "Oh, the brass, put a brass spike there unless he's going to." Okay, we'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. Daniel Silva is my guest. We're going to go into Vermeer next. Stay tuned. More music from Daniel Silva's brand new book, The Collector. Daniel, I want to compliment you. I don't know much about art, but I've learned to appreciate art more because of you. And I didn't know anything about Vermeer. And I especially was just amazed that the man who dies in 1675 is not, quote, discovered, close quote, until 1866. And then he only made 34 paintings that we have. Is that unique in the world of art, that it takes 200 years for somebody to get prominence?
Well, it's not unprecedented. I mean, if you Caravaggio, for example, was rediscovered in the 1950s. I mean, we didn't really know all of the works that he had done, so it takes an art historian with a passion for someone's work to wade into the paintings of the period, to try to figure out what was Caravaggio and what wasn't, or in the case of Johannes van der Meer, which is how he was referred to when he was at the beginning, what he really painted and what he didn't paint. So you're going around into homes and collections and trying to figure out what he actually did. And this is what a French art historian did, and the result is that Vermeer was rescued from obscurity.
That's really remarkable.
He painted very slowly. He had a couple of patrons. It took a long time to sort out what was actually Vermeer and what was painted by perhaps later imitators or people who painted like Vermeer. And now we've whittled it down to 34, 35 works. Many of them are on display right now in Amsterdam in an extraordinary exhibit, the greatest exhibit of Vermeer's work ever. But a painting called The Concert is not part of it because it was stolen from the Gardner Museum in 1990.
Now, I did know about the Gardner Museum heist, and I think that a lot of people will remember the 1990. If they don't, the details are very wonderfully retold by Daniel Silva in The Collector. I want to jump ahead to one paragraph, which I'm going to read in whole from pages 290 to 291. Tamara found her way to Novodevichy in a gypsy cab driven by a fuzzy-cheeked boy of 18 or 19. His battered old Kia reeked of cheap Russian tobacco and was bedecked with the letter Z. So was the boy. He wore a Z hoodie, a Z pendant around his neck, and a Z woolen hat pulled low over his eyes. The Ukrainians he volunteered were subhuman Nazis who needed to be exterminated. His older brother had been killed in the war, as had many of his friends. It was his profound wish, he insisted, to die for the motherland as well. Tamara shoved a wad of greasy rubles into his hand. It was tattooed with the letter Z and wished him the very best of luck. Now, Daniel, why did you put that in there? I have a theory, but why did you put that in there?
To illustrate um, the the level of propaganda, the fire hose of propaganda that is blasted at the Russian people all day, every day about what is going on in Ukraine. The saturation propaganda, the use of Nazi imagery and the most horrible language about your adversaries, your enemies, that has seeped into the Russian people, to the point where it's back to the days of Stalin, where people are ratting on neighbors, family members, if they happen to wear something that's blue and gold, or if they're reading the wrong thing on their phone, or if they make a remark in a restaurant that someone overhears. There is a lot of support for the war among the Russian populace, in particular certain strata of the Russian populace, and it's because they are just saturated in propaganda right now.
It comes through. I also did not know that there's a billionaire suburb of Moscow. Does it really have recreations of palaces from around the world?
Absolutely. That is my touch, but yeah, it's called Rubliovka.
That was really a nice touch. Now, the CIA director in this book, The Collector, is different from the one that was patterned on Mike Pompeo, but it's an old friend to readers. I'm just curious if William Burns has always been the model for the new CIA director.
No. Adrian Carter he's been in my universe since the second book, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And so the Gabriel Lance series was a spin-off of the Michael Osborne series. And Adrian Carter has just been, he's one of those classic old school Ivy League, multilingual, former Moscow bureau chief, former Afghanistan operator back in the day. Just represents the best of the agency and the long sweep of agency history. And it was time to finally make him chief. And Morris Payne was only partially inspired by Mike Pompeo, but we.
It's very funny. He liked that, by the way. I want to go back and ask you a little bit about Belgium. You throw a lot of shade on the poor Belgium Secret Service here. Are they the worst in Europe?
Well, remember that Belgium is a binational, bilingual country, okay? And so there's a lot of mistrust between the communities, and so they've always been reticent to have a very powerful internal security service because it might be misused and abused by the other side. And so, for example, with the
interesting
terrorists who attacked Paris, well, that was much of it was planned, and the roots of that attack were in Molenbeek, in Belgium, across the border. And Belgians were just completely unaware that there was a major ISIS cell operating within their country, and that cell went and attacked Paris. So they are among professionals. They do not have a good reputation.
I just started watching
Belgium is a highly. There's a lot of criminality in Belgium. If you want to go buy an AK-47, Belgium is the place to do it.
I just started watching the Israeli series on organized crime in Belgium and how they're connected up with terrorism. And you're right, it's in Belgium. Let me ask you about second-generation Holocaust guilt, Because I have a friend who just wrote a book about that. I mean, really just wrote a book about that, Karen Baum-Gordon. I never knew it existed. Is that something that is actually understood to be a condition, second generation Holocaust guilt survivor?
With the word guilt is second generation Holocaust survivor syndrome.
That's it.
And so
Yeah.
I don't know if it's actually in the DSM, but yes, it is and I gave Gabriel all of the characteristics of someone who suffered from it. And it, you know, the glimpses that I've given of what his childhood were like. You know, he was born a few years after the founding of the state of Israel. He lived in a kibbutz up in the Jezreel Valley. Most of the people who lived there were German Holocaust survivors. Not a pleasant place to live in the mid 1950s with people with that terrible grief. His mother had survived Auschwitz. She had a tattoo on her arm. She had been through terrible things, and so there's a dynamic that often developed in relationships like that, and it had a huge impact on Gabriel and who he is and why he is the way he is.
It's very well told here, and I think it's quite clear. It's the most backstory we've got. One more quick factoid. I did not know that Armenia exports diamonds, and in fact, diamonds make up a quarter of their exports. I had no idea. Is that true?
Yes, of course.
Wow.
It is true. It is true.
Where do you learn stuff like that?
You know, Hemingway, I will not get the quote right, but he said that, you know, one of the things that a writer it was, you know, had to do is to know a lot of things about everything. And so I guess the answer is I read everything all the time. As I like to explain, I'm either writing a book or reading a book. I'm a junkie for the printed word. I've always got something in my hand that I'm reading. All I do is read and research and think. And obviously, you know, books like this allow me to indulge in my passion because I've got to find ways of making it all connect. So, you know, I have to do a tremendous amount of research on a book like this, and it's the best thing
It
about the
shows.
Lawn books is that it's varied. Vermeer and the South African nuclear weapons program. Okay, only in a Daniel Silva novel.
I agree, and there's other stuff as well. I want to conclude though. I don't watch TV much, and your family's in the news business. I am in the news business, but I read because TV's too slow unless it's Endeavor or something that I like. I just don't watch it. Do you watch any TV?
I watch movies, and I do watch flip back and forth through the various news channels in the evening. But you know, I'm way you know, you made a Ted Lasso reference. You know, I've never watched an episode of Ted Lasso. I did watch Succession. I got hooked on that. But no, I don't watch a lot of television, to be honest with you.
I recommend Endeavor. When we come back, I'm gonna bring back one of the greatest characters in the Daniel Silva corpus of works. He's not gone yet, and it's the key part of this book. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with Daniel Silva. The brand new book is The Collector. Order it now. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Daniel Silva is here for his annual July 4th interview. The Collector drops soon. Get your pre-order in at Amazon if you want it on the first day. People try and steal my copies whenever they arrive. Daniel, there is a saying attributed to Napoleon: never form a picture on a battlefield. You have Gabriel and our friend Ari Shamron say to each other, never force the pieces. And by the way, that is a great admonition for anyone reading a Daniel Silva book. Never force the pieces. You've got to wait. Has that ever appeared before in the books?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And look, I think that anyone who's works in the intelligence business should have that framed on the wall. I mean, if you
Yes.
or as a prosecutor, for example, or an investigator, if you do it in the wrong direction, you can make mistakes. And so Gabriel tries to solve this mystery and what it means, piece by piece by piece, without um, coming to a conclusion too early that might take him in the wrong direction, and it's critical, and any experienced detective or intelligence officer will tell you, you know, don't don't work backwards. Don't form your hypothesis and then go out and find the facts to prove it. You're only going to make a mistake.
And that's what Napoleon was saying. If you form a picture of a battlefield, you will lose the battle because it will change. All right, I got to close with a specific question that comes out of a very odd scene. I know you don't believe in torture, neither do I. And Gabriel Allon, to my knowledge, just has never used it. But there's a scene in the book where he resorts to violence out of necessity. What do you think of that?
Um, Gabriel has from time to time lost his temper, as it were. Um,
Yes.
and look, I I write in a genre that requires a certain level of violence. Okay, but I am personally a very a peaceful person. My character carries a gun and uses a gun. I do not own a gun, and so it's sort of I guess the scene and the genre required a little bit of violence there, and the book did.
It's very
And so,
well done, and
so
it's
he
not oppressive. But it does lead me to my very last question, Daniel Silva. Does a double vent in a suit jacket actually reduce the time needed to draw a weapon?
believe it or not, the real office, you know, um, the guys who did work like Gabriel, their clothing was made specifically for them to facilitate the kind of draw that they used in the field. And so um, Gabriel is a small of back is where he prefers to carry his gun. Um, um, but Mossad did create clothing for field officers to make it fast to get their gun out because they don't walk around obviously with them, and so they had to pull their weapons very quickly. And so I have never tested the proposition that the double vent is quickly, but I like the illusion.
Well, I did too, and I want to finish by saying I think this is the equal of any. My favorite Gabriel on is Moscow Rules, and I'm sure many people tell you that. But we're back in Russia. I don't know how it ends. I want to recommend it to everyone. How do you think it rates in the? Everybody loves every child. I know that, but I think you're back right at the top of your game here. Do you feel that way?
Um, I don't know that I ever left the top of my game. I went in some different
But you're back in Russia.
directions.
That's where
Yeah,
Russia
I
is
mean,
where it just
yeah,
works the best.
Russia is where I had my big breakthrough. My first number ones were Moscow Rules and the Defector, and I have a passion for the Russia story. I'm a Russian dissident at heart. I'm a pro-democracy activist at heart. I love writing about Russia, and I think this is a pretty good book. I
I
think
think
this
it's
is a
the
good
equal of any book. I just think
um,
it's fabulous. And now I can finish it. Daniel Silva, have a great 4th of July. I hope this
thank you
book
so much.
drops and as a number one New York Times bestseller book again. There are 23 of them. I always recommend start at the beginning if you want to get the full impact, and then you won't stop reading for about a year. But it's like half a book one book every other week, and you can do that in 1 year, and it would be a year well spent with Daniel Silva. Thank you, Daniel. Keep coming back on July 4th. I keep writing, but are you at work on the next one?
I actually do have a handful of pages on the new one. One of the things that I like to do as soon as I finish a book is to get going on the next one.
A great discipline. Daniel Silva, great 4th of July. Thank you for joining me again. The Collector in bookstores everywhere soon. Pre-order it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or anywhere books are sold. And all of you Americans out there, have a wonderful 4th of July. Enjoy your liberty. They don't have it in Russia. We've got it here. And thank God for that. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Talk to you tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.